it brings aid to Ukraine into reality, you have a chance to vote for it on the floor, whatever form it is in, would you vote yes?
I think it would pass. Absolutely. There's strong support for sending more aid to Ukraine. We know that we've run out of money. We know they're the backstop against Russian expansion. We know democracy kind of depends on them throughout NATO. So I think you would get something to pass. You know, you talk about a loan. Well, would it ever be repaid? You know, a rose by any other name, whatever you can do. But, you know, you've got a bill already passed by the Senate that includes a number of things that everybody supports, whether they admit to it or not, but would vote for. Why not just move that?
Well, do you think, though, that the likelihood of potentially a discharge petition that could see that Senate bill brought to the floor is higher than just Mike Johnson being able to put something of his own on the floor to get a vote? I mean, realistically, what is more likely to happen here?
Well, the Democrats have signed the discharge petition, and I understand one Republican has come over. Even those who are leaving the House, who don't have anything really to fear from Donald Trump, don't want to sign a discharge petition because that's a procedural matter. We are trying to get them to do that, however, and maybe there's a little shot. The Speaker has been very coy. Maybe I'll do this, maybe I'll do that. The shocking thing is that you let someone like Marjorie Taylor Green dictate U.S. foreign policy.
Well, on that note, Congresswoman, we did hear from Speaker Mike Johnson on Fox last night about Marjorie Taylor Green. This is what he said. Take a listen, if you will.
Marjorie and I are going to talk again this week. She's frustrated, and we all are, to your point. Every conservative is frustrated about our current position. We have the smallest majority in U.S. history. We have a one-vote margin right now. So it's very difficult to move big things up the field for our principles.
And of course, what he did not explicitly say there was the idea that Marjorie Taylor Green could actually activate her motion to vacate and try to oust him as Speaker if he puts Ukraine aid on the floor. You just said, Congresswoman, that Marjorie Taylor Green should not be dictating U.S. foreign policy. To ensure that she cannot, should Democrats step up and say, we will protect the Speaker if it means Ukraine aid gets a vote?
Well, when you're down to one vote margin, anything can happen. And I think the Democrats would much rather see Hakeem Jeffries in there than the current Speaker. You know, he acts like it's somebody else's fault that they're down to such a slim majority. It's their own fault because the positions they have taken are so extreme. He has let Marjorie Taylor Green dictate. He has let Donald Trump, as though he were still the president, dictate foreign policy. He's going to have to either step up, stand up, or get out of the way.
Well, you bring up the Democratic leader, Hakeem Jeffries. What has he messaged to your caucus about how this is likely to be handled? If you return from recess next week and in short order, all of a sudden, a motion to vacate vote is happening.
Well, we haven't talked explicitly about that. You know, you don't jinx yourself by making a plan before it gets to reality. We've mostly been talking about how to move the agenda forward when we get back. There's a lot that needs to be done now that we've gotten the appropriations out of the way. You need to look at immigration, for example, another policy area where a bipartisan bill is on the floor and they won't bring it up for political reasons. Once again, the whole question of abortion that you were talking about earlier. That needs to be addressed. Again, you know, public opinion is very different from that handful of Marjorie Taylor Greene sycophants who are threatening the Speaker. So we need to move some of these important policy agendas forward, not be doing another investigation or another impeachment of Mayorkas.
Well, in another area of foreign policy, I'd like to ask you, Congresswoman, about Israel, especially in light of the news in the last 24 hours of 7 aid workers from World Central Kitchen being killed in an Israeli airstrike. At the same time that we're getting news of the U.S. providing potentially billions more in weapon sales to Israel, should the U.S. be sending more weapons if there is a risk, potentially a sizable risk, that they are going to be used against not just aid workers, but innocent civilians, as we have seen playing out in Gaza?
Well, I thought Netanyahu's response to that incident where 7 aid workers were killed, and this is just what happens in war, was rather flip. You know, you've heard our Defense Department, our State Department, all calling for an investigation. I think IDF is going to have an investigation of how that actually happened. Once again, if you talk about the Ukraine bill that the Senate passed, in that bill is funding for humanitarian aid, which is what we need. We've called for a ceasefire, at least a temporary ceasefire. Hamas has not responded to that, and called for releasing of the hostages. That seems to be the key. A lot of things are on the table and nobody seems to be making a move, again, for political reasons rather than humanitarian reasons, which should be at the forefront. You know, I think the chef ought to get a Nobel Prize for what he's done, not just in Gaza, but around the world, feeding people in drastic situations like this.
Well, and there is so much heavy things going on around the world, Congresswoman, and it makes all of us often turn to moments of brevity and relief where we can, be that potentially looking or watching sports. It is March Madness. And of course, you represent Las Vegas. A lot of people bet on sports these days. The American Gaming Association says nearly $3 billion will ultimately be wagered on the games throughout the tournament. I know, though, you do have concerns about illegal betting, essentially. You penned a letter on this. What exactly is your paramount concern? And is it something that would require legislative action from you and your colleagues?
Well, you're right. I represent Las Vegas, and this is where you first had sports betting. When the Supreme Court lifted some provisions, it just began to spread everywhere. So you can legally bet on sports in over half of the states in the country. What I'm concerned about are some of these scandals that have come out recently with the NCAA, the baseball. You saw the agent for the baseball player, the National Football League. I want to be sure that the provisions that those leagues have are very transparent, that they're educating their players and their team, people who are employed by the team and the leagues about what's illegal, so that people who bet on these and watch them and enjoy the games know that they're being played fair and that their bet is being counted in a legitimate way and in a very regulated way. If they can regulate themselves, all the better. But it seems that some of these incidences are becoming more frequent. Now, that's a good thing that we're catching them, but it's a bad thing that they're still occurring. And if they don't regulate themselves, you will find a greater cry from the public to say, we need some help to ensure our bets. Or you'll see more people turning to illegal gaming, which takes money out of our system, out of tax revenue, out of employment of people who work in the industry. And the people who gamble have no assurances that their bets will even be paid off if they win.